Recently, Nick Brawl 2 hit the digital store shelf, with physical store shelves coming sooner or later. And as I booted up the game, played with friends, beat the campaign, and then hopped on Quick Play, I found myself trying to measure this game's value. Oh, the gameplay was good, 12 points. Solid campaign, 15 points. Garfield, 9 points. But at the end of the day, every measurement is measured in some sort of unit, whether that be feet or meters, and I found myself measuring the success of this game the most with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In the first game, people were commonly comparing its shortcomings to that of Smashy Bros. Tall goings, and it led to a larger negative reception of the game as a result. This frustrated me originally because comparing one game to another to the degree some players were doing was a lose-lose situation, because at the end of the day, there's no legal way that Nick Brawl could match Smash Ultimate blow for blow without having something different about it. And I felt tethering your thoughts and feelings to that unnecessary connection would leave no one happy. That's why in my original Nick Brawl video, I didn't criticize its flaws in comparison to Smash, except when talking about the perspective of competitive play. I wanted to lead by example, that you can value or devalue something without bringing up that one thing who put Sakurai in the hospital. Which makes it even more funny that for this video, I'm going to be measuring Nick Brawl's worth with the Smashy Bros ruler. But oh look, there's also an OG Nick Brawl ruler here too, so might as well use both while we're at it, eh? So let's start off with the most important part, the gameplay. Looking at Nick Brawl 1, we're left with 25 characters post DLC, and in NASB 2, we're looking at also 25 characters. Looking at NASB's 2 height on the ruler here may first seem disheartening, but there's actually a lot of nuance here that this surface level statistic doesn't quite show. Nick Brawl 1 had a lot of issues with overlapping character design. In my retrospective, I highlighted this fact by pointing out the fact that Reptar, SpongeBob, and Lucy Loud all had the same down air, with an inverted version of that move as their up air as well. This problem extends way past just these three, with similar aerials on Patrick, Helga, Lincoln, and even more. While yes, Nick Brawl technically has 25 characters, how legitimate is that number when a lot of the things they do are just universal? Nick Brawl 2 addresses this by making widespread changes across the cast. Nearly every move has been changed or tweaked. For example, SpongeBob is almost an entirely new moveset, with the only remains being his bubble and up B. Most characters experience a similar rework. Even characters with the least amount of changes, like Lucy for example, still has a large amount of reworked and replaced attacks that expand and develop her kit beyond its simple NASB 1 incarnation. So even with the same size roster, Nick Brawl 2 has way more meat on the bone, especially when considering that most fighting games' base roster is smaller than that of the last game's final roster, such as Street Fighter V's 46 characters to Street Fighter 6's 17. Wait, does that mean there's a Street Fighter 6 ruler now too? The roster isn't just thicker, but it's also more fluid and fun due to mechanical changes. In terms of changing what was in Nick Brawl 1, the gameplay is a bit floatier and slower tempo than before, with a little more in-lag than the first game. This feels like an intended attempt to make moves feel more weighted and more impactful, a decision that also makes the game more accessible and movement more tangible to the player. On top of the overhaul of the game's engine, they also added the slime meter, this game's way of spicing up core gameplay. It functions similarly to meters in games such as Street Fighter because as you go about your match, hitting opponents, landing parries on shield, or getting hit by opponents, the slime slowly fills up, and once you have a bar built up, you gain a lot of options such as slime canceling, slime dashing, burst canceling, enhanced special attacks, enhanced charge attacks, and if that's all too complicated, you can save up and spend all your meter on a super attack instead. This goes a long way into creating complexity into your matches because now each character has a universal resource that they must balance the risk and reward of its uses. Do I use it to give my recovery more oomph, or should I spin the meter on this charge attack to get the job done? These are decisions you have to make in this game, and it adds so much to it as a result. Going back to things you can do with it, it's clear that the concept of slime comes from traditional fighters, but the function, the action taken, bears a similar amount to another plat fighter, Rushdown Revolt. In that game, you can dash out of any move on hit, similar to slime canceling, and once per stock, you get a burst option to break out of your opponent's combo or stop knockback momentum. In Rush Rev, these things aren't tied to a meter, and canceling attacks can happen on any move, no matter what. And with Burst, it's a one-time use per stock. Nickelodeon 2 accomplishes several things by taking these mechanics and putting them behind a meter. First, it makes the game easier for casuals, because utilizing slime cancels becomes a choice, not a demand for playing the game at a competitive level. Because if you don't want to spend your resource, you can just save it for a slime special, or a super even. And on top of that, I feel like it makes the animation cancels cooler, because that use of resource all of a sudden makes Rush Rev's Roman cancel non-committal Tinder hookup into an emotionally potent committed marriage in Nick Brawl 2. So when measuring it to Rush Rev, the amount of uses are smaller, but far more impactful. So the game is well, and it has depth, but how good are the systems to play with others? Local play functions well with the ability to create controls without backing out to the main menu, and the character select is more responsive. I did have an issue where when returning to Brawler Select, player 2's controls would switch to that of player 1's, which caused them to have to remember to change it every time. Playing locally works well outside of that remote issue. But taking it online is where things get interesting. Online features 3 core categories: ranked, quick play, and lobbies, with each one functioning as you'd expect. Ranked mode is fun, and it's your typical ranked mode affair that you see most commonly in other competitive games, with its medal structure and numbering. One thing I think is cool is that you get the choice to rematch, select a new stage, or a new character, and if you don't want the rematch, you can just back out. Having several options after a match just makes the experience overall more enjoyable, especially as someone who likes to play multiple characters, because I no longer look like a jerk for one and doneing someone because I wanted to play as someone else. Instead, now I'm a jerk for switching to Mecha Plankton. Quick play functions practically the same without the whole rank and gaining points things, and lobbies are good. Currently, there's an issue where you can't set team attack on, so my desperate attempt to get a randoms rotation going were shot down by this glaring oversight, especially since you can see this little icon that says off that most likely is team attack, but go into your rule set editor and the toggle is nowhere to be found. So an issue there too. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. How's the netcode? Surprisingly, amazingly, the game runs really well, with lag spikes only occurring due to an operator's poor internet. So if you and your friend have a good connection, it genuinely feels the same as playing offline to me. And even when playing with 4 people, it wasn't a problem. Even if one of them was on Switch, which brings us to crossplay. It works. It works way better than I thought it would. Like, I have 0 complaints with crossplay aside from 2 nitpicks. One, when you quit the game, you have to re-enable crossplay sometimes upon restart. And 2, if you play with someone on Switch, your load times just became 20 seconds longer. But aside from these 2 inconveniences, crossplay has shown itself to be really freaking solid, and playing with a friend on a different platform should be of no issue. Whipping out the rulers, it completely exceeds Ultimate in that regard. The online experience is honestly incomparable, like comparing Cars 2 to Toy Story 2, or more objectively, trying to measure a skyscraper with a 12-inch ruler. So, we need a more apt ruler here. Rush Rev has way too many disconnects. Wait, when did we get an elephant ruler? Ah, here we go. Back to Street Fighter 6. And look, it measures up about the same, give or take a few features. Next up is single player content, which by having more than one mode, Nick Brawl 2 already outclasses the original. In order of appearance on the menu, let's discuss the campaign first. If you don't want spoilers, skip to the timecode below. It opens with a fully voiced opening cutscene between SpongeBob and Patrick, blowing bubbles when all of a sudden, a mysterious force drags Patrick into a black star-shaped hole, with SpongeBob following suit. After a tutorial run through a path of events and challenges, you beat the first boss or die trying and get teleported to the main hub, where you meet Clockwork from Danny Phantom. who basically gives you the expectation that Vlad Plasmus used a mind control device on the entire universe and that he needs you to stop him. I won't spoil much of the story beyond that opening part, but I must give credit to the premise. Incorporating Vlad Plasmus and Clockwork from Danny Phantom feels a bit dated considering it's an older and non-promoted show, but I find that fact really cool. It makes the experience more interesting and shows that there's thought and passion in the IP instead of just making the big bad some OC to avoid reliance on existing characters. That tutorial run does a good job of setting up the rest of the campaign because going forward, it's just more of that. Add 2 more rounds of it, and that's what you get in the main campaign. The structure follows a loop of doing that 2 or 3 times, then boom, game completed. Each run you do, you'll run into different events and bosses, along with acquiring power-ups specific to each run, as well as perks you can unlock with in-game currency to boost your power across each run. At first, discovering new power-ups and upgrading perks was super interesting and fun, but by my 3rd attempt, I had already seen most of what the game had to offer. The game is also too easy, even at the hardest selectable difficulty, hard. Somewhere down the line, I unlocked harder difficulties, but the game didn't notify me of their existence, so I had no idea that they were even unlocked. And just for the sake of it, I went back and tried the hardest difficulty after unlocking it, and it was barely noticeable. The game can start off feeling challenging, but by upgrading a singular perk, it becomes a walk in the park. That perk being one you unlock immediately, being the one that gives you extra stocks. Having up to 6 stocks at the start of a run gives you such a large cushion that the hardest part of beating a run with any character is not getting bored by the lack of challenge, and that's my biggest critique of the campaign. It's that the perks you get can be way too much of a cushion, and I feel that if they were half as strong as they currently are, it'd be more challenging. Having 2 extra stocks instead of 5 would go a large way into making the mode feel more challenging. Despite these complaints, I really dig the campaign here, and the presentation does a hefty job at adding value once things grow stale, gameplay-wise, because every single character has unique dialogue for encountering different bosses.
That means I get my 5 wishes now, right?
Or talking with different shopkeepers. It feels satisfying to have SpongeBob be happy to see Gary, or Puff be the opposite of happy to see SpongeBob. Those sort of unique moments are shallow, but if you're a fan of the series your character represents, it's pretty darn cool, even if the most of the dialogue stuff is just, your typical fluff crossover talk. I also think that the game would have benefited from having an extra boss or 2 to spice up the variety. Another cool thing is that there's unlockable costumes for each fighter, one with a purple flame, then another with the purple flame and black mat over the character model. Both these are a little bit of an eyesore, but their inclusion as an unnecessary unlockable makes its existence cool as a bonus. You unlock them by beating that fighter in a run after beating them a 2nd and 3rd time. Whipping out my ruler here, Ultimate has World of Light, which has some similar concepts as this campaign, with the unlocked boost and fighting evil versions of fighters with the occasional boss run-in, but I think NASB 2 has a pretty strong upper hand on it for several reasons. World of Light suffers from that post-power-up challenge just like NASB 2, but due to the sheer volume of things to get done in it, it's far greater in magnitude, combined with the fact that certain power-ups exist temporarily on your run in Nick 2, so you lose some of your strength going into your next run. Plus, you actually unlock things of value such as the costumes mentioned previously. In Alt, yeah, you unlock spirits, but quite frankly, I don't care about PNGs very much. And let's take a step back for a second and look at Smash Bros. Brawl's Subspace mode as well. I genuinely think that NASB 2 campaign is better than that as well. Sure, Subspace had some really sick cutscenes, but having recently gone back and played Subspace with my partner, my fond memories of Subspace were tainted by the realization that outside of said cutscenes lies a bland, boring, uninspired game that will get its own video someday. Probably. So that said, does this mean I think NASB 2 has the best Platfighter story mode? Allow me to introduce the NASB predecessor, Slap City. Slap City, another game to get its own future video someday, has my personal pick for the best story mode due to its simplicity. It has platforming levels like Subspace, but have a more focused and centralized design that focuses more on taking advantage of character toolkits and actually being a platformer, with versus battles between each one of these levels to balance the plat with the fighter. Almost every character has their own story mode that has the same levels but a unique story behind each of them. Each level has worthwhile unlockables, like even more costumes or music tracks that give incentive to play the story mode again with a new character. While its flaws and lack of grand spectacle show that the peak of what a story mode could be in a plat fighter is yet to be reached, its consistency and value and replayability make it my personal pick for the best. And Nick Brawl 2 falls just short of that on the Slap City ruler. Outside of campaign, there's also your standard fare arcade ladder, a minigame section where you can do pop the balloons or whack the bots, and a boss rush. I'd recommend not even trying the boss rush until you beat the campaign for the sake of not spoiling the surprise of the bosses in the run, because it is just bosses from the campaign. And then you have arcade mode, which plays like a perkless, power-upless version of the campaign, also taking in its lack of difficulty from the mode as well. I beat the hardest one-stock difficulty level my first try, and it left me disappointed as someone who was kind of wanting a challenge. But overall, the campaign single player is serviceable at worst and decent at best. And measuring it to other fighting games, it does pretty well. The last leg of this review journey takes us to performance. I got the game on both PC and Switch, and I can say confidently that PC looks and performs super well on my middle-of-the-road gamer PC, and by proxy, should run on lower-end PCs with reduced settings. Don't take my word for it though, do some research if you can. But now we get to Switch. Please, do not get the Switch version. It's stuck at 30 frames per second with horrible anti-aliasing and comically bad load times. But if you have no good platform mouth and you must NASB scream, the Switch port can still get the job done. There's supposedly a load time patch for the port coming soon, and while the 30 frames can be rough on readability of attacks as someone who's played 4 hours of friendlies on the Switch version, I can say it's still usable. Hey, wait a second, I didn't even bring up Mortal Kombat 1 and it's getting a ruler. This is getting out of hand. So, we've discussed all of the individual elements that NASB 2 has on the table. But when we combine it all together, what do we end up with? How does NASB 2 measure up in comparison to Ultimate, and the original Nick Brawl, and Street Fighter 6, and Rushdown Revolt, and Cars 2, and Toy Story 2, and An Elephant, and Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and Slap City, and Mortal Kombat 1? Well, here you go. That's a lot of numbers, but if you add them together and average them out, it equals this number. Sure is a fine looking number. Where's the score? What's the measurement in units? I didn't think that part out. Feet? NASB 2 is this many feet tall. Wait a fucking second. Is that a Dan Schneider ruler? No, get out of here, you sick freak. Oh god, it's ruined. It's all ruined. It's all tainted by the cruel reminder of the evil lurking behind every piece of childhood magic. No more rulers. I'm throwing them all away. Now that the ruler's gone, what do I even have left? Without some gimmick, I'm just some small YouTuber repeating what you probably have already heard IGN say. I wanted a silly stipulation that would allow me to introduce new ideas to people familiar with something else. But instead, all I got was a disgraced studio executive branded ruler. This was important to me, dang it. NASB 1 was something really special to my development as a gamer, and by proxy, a human being. I thought if I could just shift a few heads, maybe I can send a few Smashy Bros diehards to either touch grass or try something new. Making comparisons is a tricky thing to do as someone who wants to be open-minded towards new things. Too little of it, and your attempt to understand something new is baseless, and your interest in doing so becomes baseless as well. Do it too much, and then you just strip the thing of its personal identity and its worth. Or end up with this abomination. I just want to get people to try this game. I want to try and get people who are too cemented in what they already know to try and learn something new. In my heart of hearts, I want to think that if I Swear the Fool, can get some teenager living with their parents to try a Nick game, maybe they can become more open-minded to smaller things, which could lead them to become more open-minded about bigger things. Talk about a fool's errand. No rulers, no comparisons, no acknowledgement about the morality of the product. Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 is good. Hell, for me it's great. To answer the question in the title and thumbnail, is it better than Ultimate? In my opinion, sure, why not? Or it isn't. It was clickbait more than anything. Clickbait for a narrative and emotional purpose is what I'd put on my form I will inevitably file to avoid being put on the annoying clickbaiters list. The game's $50 on Steam. I recommend it being worth 50 smackers as someone who's already bought it twice, but if you're still on the fence, wait till it's on sale. Your skepticism is valid, and even if I think the game's amazing, don't let me goad you out of some cautionary spending habits. Ice or the whatever. Signing out.